to predictable revenue. And yeah, I think really appreciate Colin for helping get this going and put this together. It's just really trying to give people, I said sometimes like a bigger picture view of what we see that takes predictable revenue, a bit of the model. And I think by now you probably know a bit about us. So I'll just skip through this. I don't know. By the way, if you have any questions, like Colin, just while we're here, like what would be just a fact you think not that many people would know about you to throw out?
That not many people know about me.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
might be uncommon knowledge or
yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a video on the internet somewhere. I haven't seen it, but I have an accidental amateur kickboxing record of 0-1, and it comes down to the fact that the definition of amateur fight night in Vancouver means a bunch of guys in a gym or a bunch of people in a gym, and it's like tournament style. And amateur fight night in Australia means we're selling tickets, and this thing's going to be televised. And so, yeah, I won't go into too many more details, but that's you see my nose a little bit messed up. That's from that event. How about yourself, Aaron?
yeah, so I in the backyard I have a little tree stump, like a little slice of a tree stump, and I have some throwing knives just off of Amazon, and they're fun, like throwing knives. So they're tricky. Like we did, I don't know if anyone's tried throwing axes out there. It's actually really fun because now, and even in Los Angeles, not that we live there anymore, but they had opened a LA Axe and done it in Scotland and probably someplace else. So highly fun, easier than throwing knives, but actually throwing knives more satisfying. So
I got to point out LA Axe.
LA Axe, yeah, and axe. I think they actually do axe throwing and beer,
Nice.
which you think that wouldn't make a lot of sense to combine, but it's probably good for sales.
Yeah.
So
Anybody in chat that's like, why does Colin find that so hysterical? It's because that's the LAX is the airport code for.
yeah, LAX is true, and then LA Axe. I think it's spelled AX. Yeah, I can see the confusion there.
Cool.
Okay, well, good times. So why don't we talk a bit about, so the book Predictable Revenue came out 2011. I've been circulating drafts of that book probably for the year beforehand, maybe 2010. I know there's a lot of people who saw Word docs or PDFs and things before it actually got published. And again, I remember, I think I wrote about it, why I published it in the Impossible book, the sequel, and I published it that year because I got married and had kids and had to make more money and like get my Duffin gear to get the book out. So that's hard to believe it was 9 years ago. And in that time, there's a lot of things that have not changed at all, and lots of things that have changed. So some of the things, like the main change that's happened since then is just technology, because the continued, more technology and the decreasing cost of building stuff has meant that there's more apps of all types, like more sales apps, more marketing apps, and there's more channels, right? So there's more apps sending more email, also now sending more LinkedIn, phone calls, and people are also getting stuff off of WhatsApp. This isn't just outbound, but just like WhatsApp and social media. So there's more channels, more noise, more everything from every direction. So for a prospector, for a sales team, for a customer, everyone has more complexity, more noise. But it's not just cold emails or calls or social media messages. It's everything. Right? That's one of the things that if you're competing for someone's attention in their inbox, you can define inbox as voicemail box or email inbox or LinkedIn inbox or whatever, however you want to define that. That's you're competing against kind of everything. So that's true. That's really been sort of the dominant change. Is there is more technology, but again, it's kind of like the arms race where the more technology is meant more noise. It's help. We're basically in the same spot. It's kind of like London. They said 100 years ago the average commute was 40 minutes, or sorry, the average speed of London traffic was 5 miles an hour 100 years ago with horse and buggy, and the average speed of London traffic today is 5 miles an hour, which because of traffic. So I feel like that's very similar with outbound. I mean, not just outbound, inbound is more technology. It's just created we're kind of in the same spot, just different challenges.
And one of the things that I think that I remember hearing you speak in a very early when I first met you, and somebody asked you something along the lines of, what is the formula? And like, what is the formula, and like, what is the reason that we want to do this? And really, that the magic moment is that deals are closing regularly from a reliable source of net new meetings. And I think the biggest piece to that, the sort of formula, the way they make that happen, was, and I can't remember your exact wording, but it was along the lines of consistent top of funnel, right? So you need consistently adding, booking new meetings for your salespeople from, whatever channel. You need to work every opportunity relentlessly. And then you've got to give it time. Because if you're not doing all three of those things, you're you're not going to get to that ultimate outcome, that ultimate goal of predictable revenue, and you're not going to get to that sort of magical moment. And so what we have, Aaron, on the next slide is we've kind of laid out, this is the formula, and this is going to be the common theme as we move forward with our content. And as you're seeing, videos and podcasts, and communication from us, is we're really going to focus on helping outline, is this going to be helping you grow consistent top of funnel? Is this going to help sort of down the line working every opportunity relentlessly? Or is this going to be around the time and investment really required? And the reason we wrote it out like a formula is, one, because I thought it'd be cool to shape it like an Excel formula, but to also give you the sense that if all you were doing is booking a whole bunch of meetings for your account execs, but when your account execs get there, they don't know how to handle them. You don't do the training to set them up for success, and they're handling those meetings exactly the same as they would any other meeting, and they're not converting into pipeline, that you're not going to get there. So this is intentionally laid up as three things, and they all multiply by each other. Because if you don't have if you're not investing, if you're not thinking about the right time horizons, you're not going to be seeing the inputs or the outputs. You're not going to get the outputs that you really desire. And ultimately, if we were to look at this as a grand funnel for like how to grow a company, there's probably a couple things missing. So the sort of foundation, that's not really our sweet spot, but I felt, since I was doing a formula slide, we kind of felt that we needed to add those. And if you look at the next slide, Aaron, they're basically three things that sort of belong in the one greater formula, that aren't really our sweet spot. So we're not going to dive into them today, but we thought they deserve to be mentioned. And one is employee success. If your people aren't happy, if you're not treating them well, you're never going to be able to build a great long-term company. It's not going to be stable. You're not going to have the training and tools, et cetera, required to like really go up for the long haul and hit that predictable piece. On the flip side of that, maybe not flip side, but on the other side is the sort of customer success piece. If all you're doing is booking customers and they stay on your SaaS platform for 3 months, you're probably not making back your cost to acquire them. Chances are. Right. And so it's not just about the sort of revenue piece, is not just about the net new revenue added in. It's about how long that revenue stays. And customer success is a huge piece of that. And then if you zoom out one layer further, this is one thing that we've seen over and over and over and over again, is if you don't have product market fit, these channels aren't gonna work. They're not gonna be as effective. And this particular piece has come up a number of times. And every time we go through and we interview our customers and we talk to everybody, I like to look at like, what was the piece that we can take credit for? What was the piece that we learned? What was the piece that, what is the commonality amongst our best customers or the companies that we see that are most successful with building outbound sales teams? And that's product market fit. And it's almost a layer that sits outside this formula and sort of multiplies by everything. So the strength of your product market fit is going to have a huge impact on everything that you do downstream. And so just wanted to add those three pieces in, because if you're looking at this as a grand formula, those are certainly factors. There are probably others that we're not. So if you're in chat, let me know. What are we missing from that formula? What haven't we considered that you think should be involved here? And I'll pass it to Aaron to talk about that sort of first piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is also on here because one of the most common reasons people struggle with outbound growth, like proactive growth, or including outbound prospecting, outbound selling, is because they're not ready. They're not quite ready on at least the customer success or product market fit front. So I still see you got that in number one, right? Building consistent top of funnel because the whole idea of this was a breakthrough idea. It may not seem like it to a lot of people, but at the time it was a breakthrough idea for lots of people. The fact that, doubling your salespeople, it's not the way to double revenue. It's you got to double your lead generation, and to separate those two things. So it's really, how do you create meetings in a consistent way with new accounts, or in other words, like once you're trying to kind of expand past your current pond. So there's these three ways to do that, three types of leads: seeds, nets, and spears. And seeds, outbound prospecting, outbound business development. Yep, so Flora the dog agrees, if you can hear that. So seeds, outbound prospect, seeds, word of mouth. I'm getting them all mixed up. It's all the S's. Seeds, word of mouth. So usually happy customers, customer referrals, people friends, family networks, right? Relationships, word of mouth is the best. Hard to grow. Best way to make it predictable, if you can, is through customer success management. Just, hello, my spouse, can you please, the dog, yeah.
The dog.
Like it's really, can you get the dog?
It's funny because
so loud.
Aaron is we can't hear the dog that badly, and it's not nearly as interesting as Sarah's dog. That we won't go into the story for a third time, but yeah, dogs are dogs. It's gonna happen.
They're great. Yeah, we have probably it's no secret, 9 kids, but we also have 4 dogs because why not? So three ways. Word of mouth, hard to grow. Best way, kind of like a customer success management program. Nets, marketing, quantity over quality. Usually lots of leads, few are going to be a good fit. Inbound marketing, great, love it. And then spears, outbound prospecting. So you have a human, typically they have a targeted list, could be for partners, could be for customers, biz dev. Again, all 3 are great. It may not, you don't do all 3 at once, but over time you want all 3. So let's just say that you've nailed your niche. So you've got a way to, really means a way to connect with people who don't know you, to interest them in a conversation. That itself is a very challenging proposition. So typically, as you're starting to invest in paid lead generation, paid growth, the seeds and nets types of lead generation programs drive leads typically into you, right? Inbound leads, right? So you have SDRs, you become inbound SDRs to respond to them. I'm not a fan of the term SDR itself, because what I found is that so many people confuse the job SDR, and they kind of mix inbound and outbound, which are completely separate jobs. We'll get to that. So seeds and nets tend to drive leads in, handled by inbound SDRs. Outbound prospecting, in this case, usually, ideally, done by a dedicated outbound SDR. Could be done, of course, by other people, but outbound SDRs driving that. Again, they're all, whatever way you're doing, you want predictable lead generation as much as you can, because that is what will lead to predictable revenue. So one thing to mention, because I get these questions a lot, is like, hey, which one should I focus on? Seeds, nets, or spears? Kind of word of mouth, or content marketing, inbound marketing, or outbound. So I would say typically, you always, if you're early stage, right, a few 100,000, under $1 million or 2, it's word of mouth is going to get things going usually. So once you have some customers, you next kind of build on when you're ready for paid growth, or basically investing to connect with audiences who don't know you yet. If you're a product company, or if your thing is somewhat easy for people to get, simple explanation, outbound, better place to start. If you're a services company, again, generally it's harder to explain what you do for people to click in and kind of get it. If it's something complex you do, often a platform, usually you want to start with content marketing. It's just a better way to engage people so that you can kind of explain to them what you do so they can get it. At some point, again, you want to do inbound and outbound. They're two great tastes that taste great together. Peanut butter and chocolate. I guess in the States, they say peanut butter and jelly. I don't know about other places. That's kind of when you start. Can you break the rules? Yeah. I mean, look, if you're a founder or a revenue executive and you just have a real passion for one or the other, like word of mouth or content marketing or outbound. Like, do start with whatever you just are into, because all of them are challenging no matter what you do. And you're going to have to be able to have the endurance and the determination to go the distance to get off the ground and make it work well. Moving on. So now I referred to this, I got this idea that outbound and inbound SDRs are different, right? And there's a Bridge Group, love Trish Bertuzzi. There's a Bridge Group survey or study, I think it was last year, that said that 75% of SDR teams mix kind of inbound, right, responding to inbound leads, and outbound prospecting. Now, I don't know what percentage. A lot of those, I'm assuming, are basically like inbound SDRs that are doing some prospecting on the side. Okay, I get that. The problem is there are a lot of companies and they just have the SDR job, and those SDRs, their job is to do inbound and outbound. That doesn't work. That just does not work. They're two completely different jobs, different mindsets, metrics, process, methodology, communication, comp, quota, everything. There's a veneer of similarity, meetings, emails, etc. But no, totally different. So if you want, the bottom line is, if you want outbound prospecting to work, be effective in a predictable way, you need dedicated resources, including could be dedicated outbound SDRs. That's a cardinal rule. Cardinal rule number one. Okay.
Totally. I like to think
off my soapbox now. Off my soapbox.
Man, no, I couldn't agree with you more. As somebody who sat and I've tasted the inbound and I've tasted the outbound and done both, and both as a rep, I've seen it as a manager of SDRs, and now as sort of like trying to organize and build sales teams. The experience of being and the mindset of being an inbound rep is so different than an outbound rep. You might sit them down, and if you're watching them sit at their chairs, you might not be able to tell from the outside. But with an inbound rep, you're used to customers coming to you, right? And with inbound, they're generally motivated, and there's tons of motivation there. And then you jump on the phone with them and you qualify them, right? And that's the mindset that you fall into. And it's a very a passive mindset. And I don't mean any sort of slant against anybody that's doing inbound, but it's sort of a sit and wait. And you absolutely have to work your opportunities, and there's tons of work to be done. And the ones that don't show up, there's obviously, like, you have to be active in going after them. But it's a very different mindset. It's sort of like if you're sitting at the bottom of the hill and customers are kind of rolling down to you, right? You kind of sit and you're like, oh, well, is that one the right shape? Is that the right size? And you're trying to like judge. And then when you sit in the outbound seat, you're on the other side of the hill, right? And now you've got to push rock up the hill. And if you stop pushing, the rock just rolls down and crushes you, or just takes off. And so having that mindset of, okay, I've got to go hunt my own dinner. I've got to go hunt. I've got to go hunt. I've got to go hunt every day. It's that hunger that lives in you. That if you're mixing the two, it's really hard from a rep perspective to stay focused on the outbound. That's at least my experience.
Yeah, it's true.
And so if we dial it into, come back to the formula here, that first piece was consistent top of funnel, right? And so Aaron was talking about, you need to be adding net new meetings with new logos into your account execs pipelines on a regular basis, which is like which is a hard thing to do, and is impressive if you've managed to do it. But as the formula says, it's not the only thing that's important, but it certainly is that first half of the formula. And the second piece is really making sure that we're working every opportunity to the best possible outcome. And this involves your entire team, because a strong sales process can turn crappy meetings into gold, but a weak sales process is going to turn great golden meetings into shit. And you're not going to get anywhere if you've got a really weak sales process. And so there's so much room that we could talk about within this sort of second piece of the formula. But I want to get to chat. I want to get to questions. And we'll leave some room at the end to sort of dive in. But really, I think the biggest piece, if I look at like, what is the leading edge? What is the start of this formula? It's really that discovery process. right? If you're operating, if I come back to my sort of hill analogy, if you are treating, if you're an account exec or you whoever it is that's taking this sort of first discovery call meeting, and you're expecting the rocks to be rolling down the hill to you, and your questions and your process is all designed as if these rocks are rolling down, these customers are motivated but not qualified, or not necessarily qualified, if that's the unknown, that's a very, very different mindset than if you are if you need to be pushing that rock up the hill. And so the second piece of the formula is making sure that you're running a killer discovery, because you need to be qualifying for, are they the right person? Great. Are they motivated? Right. And I think we'll get into a little bit time and like, should we, how do we, do we band, do we medic, et cetera, sort of not as relevant. But what we're really looking for in this first meeting is this the right person? And is there some sort of pain here? Because if they're not the right person, okay, let's fire that back to the sales dev org, and let's push them to go find the right person, and then let's qualify for pain, right? If they're the right person at the right kind of company, but there's no pain yet, that's great. It's not like I'm going to close them in the next 90 days, great, but it's still a great connection. And as somebody who spent most of my life as an account exec before becoming an entrepreneur, these are my favorite type of, I guess, lost reasons why I'm not going to lose a deal is they're not ready yet. I love that because that gets me in early. That means this person hasn't even entered the buying journey. It means they haven't even talked to any of my competitors. So the earlier I can get in my opinion, the better, because now this deal isn't going to close this quarter, but it's going to close 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 quarters from now. And all it takes is a little bit of consistency in that process, in my follow-up, in my nurture, to really connect the dots there. Because that's when outbound gets really powerful. If you're an account exec, if you're an SDR, is not the first month you do it. It's not even the first 6 months you do it. It's after you've built up this stash, this little pot, this little pile of gold of these prospects that you've talked to that are the right person, they're at the right company, they got some kind of pain. Or they might not be like actively trying to solve that pain, but you know that there's something. And so that's why that first piece of working every opportunity relentlessly is that discovery call. Because if you miss it here, you're basically killing the rest of the op, and nothing you do, pardon me, downstream is going to make a difference. And so killer discovery is the first piece. Then regular call coaching and review and deal review is the second piece. Because it's one thing to say, hey, we've got a great discovery process. It's another thing to make sure that the whole team is running that same playbook, that they're asking the right questions, that they're working every opportunity. And this isn't one of those things where you can just rely on super reps to be super reps. This is one of those things where we need the entire organization working opportunities in like the same way. And it's impossible to hire those like unicorn reps that just consistently close. And so what we need to do here is make sure that we're regularly coaching and giving everybody the training that they need to be successful here. And so, like I said, it takes the whole team. That first step is the sales development rep to make sure you're booking the meeting. The second step, that leading, is making sure that your AE or whoever's closing is running a great discovery. Then the kind of 2A, I guess, is making sure that the sales managers are coming in and reinforcing with call coaching, call review on a regular basis. And then the last piece here, which I kind of alluded to, is to work them on their own timelines. And I'm going to pause for a second. I just want you to think on that. The number one, I guess, self-limiting belief that I've seen of so many customers that we've worked with, not all, and certainly not the majority, hopefully, but a large enough number that I feel the need to say something, is that they feel like there's no value in a meeting, there's no value in talking to somebody if they don't have a project in the next 90 days. The single most destructive thing you can do to your future pipeline is that attitude. Because if you're treating everybody like it's they're basically a means to an end. I only care about the prospect if they're going to buy something from me in the next 90 days. It's the single most destructive attitude. If you are treating them like humans and you're getting to know them, you're building that relationship, and then you're helping them, if and when they come into pain and on their own timeline, because we can't manipulate them into, as much as the outside world thinks we're a bunch of used car salesmen that can convince people to do anything. The reality is that that's just not the case, and that's very rarely been the case. Maybe I just wasn't a very good car salesman. I can say that because I did sell one single car, not cars. But anyway, working opportunities on their own timeline, and what this looks like, we'll go a little bit deeper into the timelines a little bit later. But it's not pressuring. It's not trying to force them up. Like, you've got to be enough to be driving the momentum to sort of push them up the hill a little bit. But you might not get them over the hump. You might get them to that sort of first plateau where it's like, hey, we know each other. And I know there's a bit of pain, but you know what? Let's just hang out at this plateau until you're ready to take that next step. And so those are the kind of big pieces, is like running a great discovery process, making sure that you're consistent with your opportunity, like how you're working these opportunities, and then making sure that you're nurturing these accounts for the long run. Because if you're just throwing away, like if you think about, let's say a magic number, 1 in 20 customers is in an active buying mode. That's 5% of the market, which I think is probably generous. I've heard things of like 7 to 3%, but let's just use 5 because it makes the math easy for a guy like me. That means that if you're an SDR and you're booking 10 meetings a month, that means every other month you're going to get one person who's like in a process or in a buying mode. And that means that 95% of these people you're talking to are going to fall into the camp that I'm talking about. And they're going to require strong nurture programs over the course of not just 3 months, but multiple quarters. And this is really where the majority of your deals, opportunities, return on investment is going to come from. Aaron, I know you've got a couple of tactics and you got some things that you want to add here.
Jump to that. So just one common mistake too, on that discovery process, which really also starts at the qualification, right? There's qualification and discovery, kind of go hand in hand. There's often an SDR, inbound or outbound, AE. So within that whole kind of like scope of qualification, whoever's doing it, and discovery, whoever's doing it, just remember at these early stages, like inbound opportunities and leads are very often very different than outbound. You need separate, different sets of qualification criteria for each of them. So the inbound criteria tend to have more items because you can, they're usually a little further along in their thinking, researching, and you're trying to route them. They hopefully already know who you are and a bit about what you do. That's not the case with outbound. Okay, so with outbound, you're going to them, right? It's a kind of a pet peeve I have, that there's this myth that's floated around that buyers have already done 76% of all their thinking and research before they talk to you. I mean, that is complete truth for inbound leads, but complete BS for outbound. And the point of outbound is you're going out to people to start conversations, to introduce a new idea, often before they may even know that your solution exists. They might know they have a problem, but they may not know yet what the solution could be. So you're kind of bringing a new idea. Your goal there is not to have BANT. With outbound, you're really trying to talk to someone with influence or power, identify they have a need, and they're interested in the next step. So I don't have a fancy acronym. It's just ANI: authority, need, and interest. But the point is, your outbound criteria is different than inbound. So a common mistake, kind of as Collin alluded to, which is if your salespeople are just used to having all inbound leads and deals, they become inbound dependent. And so when they get on outbound appointments and not used to sort of discovering from scratch, selling from scratch, they often fumble. So that's really important. Another one, however you define your sales stages, you're not gonna have perfect stages. It's impossible. So whatever you have, just do your best to try to get everyone to apply them as consistently as possible. Because the consistency is more important than the actual definitions of the stages. If people are using your stages inconsistently, you can't measure them or use them anyway. So at least if you're using them consistently, you can have baselines and kind of measure progress or problems. The last one, the Zora's T-shaped funnel, is this idea from the Impossible to Inevitable book. Zora, they're a recurring revenue billing platform. They've got to be probably more than a couple $100 million of revenue. They're public, a couple billion valuation. I haven't checked lately. But they sell, one of their big segments are Fortune 1000 companies. And the nature of their model is sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years for a company to be ready for a buying decision. Because if you're talking to Ford Motor Company, and if they're basically deciding, do we create a subscription product or not, there's nothing you can do. You have to wait for them to decide for their business they're going to do a subscription product, and then they're in a position to consider technologies. So their T-shaped funnel is this idea that they've got this just called like 1,000 target accounts, um, and they're doing their best to engage all of them over time. So they never know when someone actually makes that business decision internally and they're ready to evaluate Zora, then they drop down the T into their own funnel. So it's just kind of being ready to realize that you have to be prepared to kind of nurture accounts for as long as it takes if they're a good fit. You can't control when that is usually, and just be ready and be there and kind of stay top of mind and be helpful to them. And so when they're ready to make a decision and can evaluate you, they think of you and they're already pre-educated. That's called the T-shaped funnel. That's a good one.
Totally. I love that. And I see Zeal in the chat saying, hey, subscribe. And so since he's saying that, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We got a bunch of content coming out over the next couple of weeks, specifically on the things that we're talking about today. So if you want to make sure you don't miss that, make sure you hit the subscribe button and then that little bell notification icon to make sure that YouTube actually tells you when the content comes out. So thank you to Zeal in chat for the reminder there. So if the first piece is booking a ton of meetings and the second piece is working them all to the best possible outcome, don't we have it there? Like, isn't that good enough? And as I kind of alluded to, it's not. Because if you're just looking at this in a very short-term lens, if you're saying, okay, 6 months into a sales development program, if I don't have ROI, oh, this thing's a total failure, right? Like this is the third leg. And so it's all about the time, it's the investment, it's the resources, it's how you think about this. If you are doing the most frustrating thing I've seen, and I've seen this a number of times, is teams get the meetings right. And then they get to about the 6-7 month mark, and then they start closing deals. And a manager comes in, or the CEO, or whoever it is, economic decision maker goes, it took too long to get that first deal closed, so we're going to shut this down. This whole program doesn't make sense. And it's so painful sitting in my seat because I'm watching this organization put a monumental amount of work into pushing a giant rock up a hill to get a new program off the ground, up and running. Cold email, cold calling, everything is so hard. There's so much. And so you watch them sweat and grind and push, and they get to just about the top, or maybe it flattens, it plateaus, and you can see that it's going to start rolling downhill real soon. And then somebody comes in, the person that writes the check, and goes, took too long to get to the top of this hill, so we're going to cut it. It's like you've created all of this potential energy, literally potential if we're talking physics, and you're going to watch it like it's so close. You just need another 3 months to really see this thing rocking and rolling. It's probably the number one thing that frustrates me about my job is watching people put all this work in. They get so close, and then they're like, nah, took too long. It's like, but you're right there. You're right there. You're literally right there. It's like driving from, wherever you are to go see the Grand Canyon, and then getting like a mile out and be like, you know what? It took too long. Let's turn around and go home. Let's go find let's go look at Mount Rushmore instead. But it's right there. It's so close. You just need, just give me just a little bit more time. I'll stop rambling because it genuinely is one of, if not the most frustrating part of my day or my job, it's certainly top 3. And so I just want to share, and Aaron, I know you know a bunch about the timelines here, but really we should be talking sort of 12 to 24 months. And if we're looking at the sort of quarters, your experience will vary wildly. I promise you that. The only thing that I can tell you about these numbers here is that these are wrong for you. These are the average numbers, right? And these are going to smooth out the highs, the peaks, and the valleys. So some people are going to take a lot longer. Some people are going to take a lot less time. And I'll add the caveat that this is specifically for the first time that you do this. So if you've been there, you've done this before, if you've hired a senior sales development exec, you're going to get there faster. It may not be light years faster, but it's going to get there faster. So if we look at Q1, you're hiring the team. This is from a cold start. You got nothing. You've got maybe a couple of account execs. Maybe you've got an inbound organization and a couple of AEs, or maybe you don't have anything at all. You're hiring your first team. And in my head, that first team, we can talk about this in chat. So let me know what your first team looked like. If you started the just SDR first route, or if you started an SDR manager first. I'm a huge fan of SDR manager first. if you've got the budget, SDR manager and 2 SDRs. And you can probably stagger this by a month or two to give the SDR manager time to start putting things in place and actually hit the phones themselves. I say hit the phones, I mean like hit your outreach, hit your sales loft, et cetera, so that they're actually cutting their teeth and they're writing all that messaging. But it's hiring that first team, manager plus 2 SDRs. That's going to take you 3 months minimum if you're lucky, if you already know somebody. So if Q1 is hiring your first team, Q2 is going to be ramping them, onboarding them, ramping them up to like hitting some sort of minimum quota. And generally, if I'm looking at quotas and I'm forced to share some general stats on the internet, I'm going to be a little bit conservative. I'd say like 2, 4, 7 for the first 3 months. Everybody will differ. We see clients come in and they get a bunch of meetings, and the first month they're like, see, you were wrong. And then we have clients that are like, they take 4 months or 5 months to start hitting that ramp. You will hit it. There's just lots of roadblocks. We don't have time to go into all of them. And it's so easy to just hit one of those little pieces in the formula that multiply everything by 0. And so Q2 is ramping to productivity. Q3, you're going to start to see these meetings from Q2 starting to turn into pipeline. And then Q4 to 6, depending on your sales cycle and how long your sort of typical deals tend to take, you're going to start to see that ramp to consistent closing. And so we're talking at least 18 months before you're starting to see, air quotes, predictable revenue. And so if your boss has bought you the book and put you in the chair and said, hey, I want you to create this for me, and they're 9 months in, they're like, oh, it's not very predictable what you're doing here, you need to point them back to this slide, this formula, and say, listen, it takes time, and there's no way to just turn on a fire hose of net new revenue in 3 months. That's impossible. So Aaron, I know you got a few things to add here. What's your take?
Well, like you said, it's impossible to add that new revenue in 3 months. I think the internal joke was, the CEO who's saying, hey, we've been doing this for 3, 4 months. Like, there's no revenue yet. I'm like, well, how long is your sales cycle? 6 months. So the thing is, when you think about ramping a team or program, getting to quality pipeline, and then adding a sales cycle, and one of the gotchas people forget about or don't realize is that if you say, well, our sales cycle's been 3 months. Okay, but yeah, if that was for maybe inbound leads that already knew you, were familiar with you, and so on. So your outbound sales cycle might be double that, 6 months. So there's a lot that goes into building your funnel and kind of getting experience to know what your funnel is like through data, so that you have that predictability. It can take, a year, year and a half. Everyone's, as Colin said, some people are faster, a lot of people are slower. If you're a services company or a tough niche, it could be longer. There's a lot of factors that go in. So I think the idea is that you, even at Salesforce.com, which really had a great product, it took, a year. I think the last quarter, there's a lot closed. But really even like marketing executive team didn't kind of decide to expand the team from 2 people to a lot more until after. Yeah, it took a year. So you just got to be in it for the long haul but in the meantime, you should see traction, right? Every month. Sorry, can you guys just hear me? My audio right?
Yep. Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, I think so you should be seeing things like, response rates, connect rates, meetings, like a lot of indicators you're going in that direction the entire way. The first few months may or may not be extra frustrating, but you should see progress, if not revenue yet. So nowadays, look, yeah, there's a lot of new problems that didn't exist before. Some problems are the same: time management, crafting emails. The form of the problem might have changed. By the way, everyone's still, especially in sales teams, but there's still just so many challenges to writing good emails. So, but here's just some common ones I still see, right? We talked about teams getting sales specialization wrong, like specifically not dedicating outbound prospectors to outbound, right? You just having inbound SDRs do part-time prospecting, and it's not going to get you that consistent top of funnel that you want. It's just not. You need dedicated resources, whether it's an outside firm, whether it's your own people, that they need to be focused, because it's hard, like anything else. Like I say, for a sports team, is there any sports team where the coach says everybody attack and everybody defend? It doesn't make sense for salespeople to do all their own prospecting and closing, or SDRs do all the inbound leads and try to do outbound on the side. Inbox noise is a real thing. Everyone's just super busy, but it's outbound still works. Just means you have to be more targeted, focused on the right customers, the right message, and know your different channels. Inaccurate dashboards. It's hard to get outbound metrics right. There's a lot of subjectivity. Was it qualified or not? Was it outbound or not? A lot of salespeople who appreciate their prospector gonna do them a favor. Yeah, I'll accept this. Was it really? That's just one example. And again, just this complexity and overwhelm, all the technologies, fields, it's just a lot. So that's one of the things that, even though the amount of published practices and technologies helps simplify things and speed things up, the complexity confuses things and slows it down. So sorry, we're kind of in this moving the same speed we were 10 years ago, even with all the new technology. Collin, let me flip back to you.
There we go. Muted myself there. One of the things that a conversation I had with the head of revenue, Julian, in the days leading up to predictable revenue was, I know Aaron was going to talk about data and was going to talk about Salesforce. So I said, well, how did we do? Right? Like Aaron and I wrote about a bunch of these things, and we said, these are all the critical pieces to generating predictable revenue and measuring it and creating the dashboards and that. How did we do? And we didn't get. I don't know if we got a passing grade or not. Let's put it that way. And so I said, well, what's your wish list? If you're starting a new team from scratch, what are the things that you would want? And I want to make sure we leave time for chat. And I see lots of questions in there, so I'll just leave this slide with you. If you want to get a copy of this slide, or if you got questions about the content, the link to the slides, as well as Julian, the one who posted this wish list, is going to be in Slack. So the whole idea is these are the things that are going to give you insight into what does this growth machine look like, right? Are people showing up to meetings? Are people booking meetings? Are they not showing up? Are they turning into pipeline? Is that pipeline turning into real potential revenue? And then, is that revenue actually going to become real? And so there's a lot of context that goes into this, and I just want to throw them all up in a slide. But we don't actually need to go into them. I do want to remind everybody, if we go to that last slide there, the formula: consistent top of funnel, consistent process, time, right? Those are the three big pieces. Aaron, I want to put it back to you here. If we look at that first piece of the funnel, what's the most important element for you when it comes to the generating consistent top of funnel?
I think, if it's outbound, it's just to make sure you have people who are focused on it full time, and you're not trying to have like an intern do it either. You got to have like a good person. They don't have to experience, but they got to have to be, get head on their shoulders, problem solver, and do it full time. Help figure it out, whether they're the project leader or the actual prospector. Focus.
Perfect. So if I'm looking at in Slack or in chat, I will throw you a link to chat or to the Slack chat room in just a second here. If you give me let me find that down or track that down for you. Here we go. We'll throw that in chat. Beautiful. There it is. So if I look at the second piece here, work every opportunity relentlessly. The biggest piece, and I'm going to cheat here because it's really two pieces. It's an effective discovery, and it's working accounts on their terms, on their timelines, on the right timeline. And if you're not running an effective discovery, these deals aren't going to enter pipeline in the first place. And so that's step one. And then step two is you need to work them for the long term. And so if you're not doing that, you're not going to turn them into actual revenue, or at least you're not going to turn as many. And you might cherry pick, like I said, 1 in 20 might turn into an opportunity, but 1 in 20 is not good enough. I want 20 out of 20 to enter my pipeline. They may not all move at the same speed. And in fact, I can guarantee they certainly won't, but I want to get all 20 in pipeline. If an SDR says hey, I think they're a potential, and then the AE confirms, yeah, they're the right person, right company, I never want my AEs to let that lead die, to let the conversation die. And it's okay that there's a sort of mutually agreed upon next step, and it could be 3 months, 6 months, whatever. But if you're not doing that, it's not happening.
Yep.
So Aaron, the last piece, time.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say it's not just about like setting it and forgetting it. You know, just let it sit for 12 months, and like it's really like that intentional, checking in on it, being aware of it. Is there progress? Where is there a problem? Um, month after, week after week, and month after month, and honestly, it can get very tedious and boring. Can. So you got to kind of get through that and push through that to get to the side of like creating that revenue. Once it's created and you have a track record, it's easier for people to be patient because they kind of know, oh, it takes me 2 months to ramp and 7 months for this. And yeah, that first part where you just don't know and you just got to work on faith, or that's a big part of it. Especially if you lose a key person. Yeah, just it's like that intentional practice that the 10,000 hours guy mentioned. Can't remember the author's name.
Malcolm Gladwell. I
Yeah,
think he
that's
made
the
it
guy, yeah.
popular, but I don't remember. I don't think it was actually his.
Someone, yeah. It's like
Yes.
intentional time. It's like you're not just, you're watching, you're using it well for progress month
Right
over
on.
month.
Cool. Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah.
Want to go to chat because I see a ton of questions in there, and thanks to everybody for jumping in. Zeal for having, really living up to the name, the most energy in chat I see. So questions. So what are some best practices for like, what are the right tools for cutting down on the phone tag and delivering on the effective follow-up? So let's go to Aaron. What do you think? What are your thoughts on the sort of, is there a right tool?
On cutting down on phone tag, actually, if we talked about earlier, if you can move, if someone's open to moving to text or WhatsApp, I feel like that's really helps a lot. I haven't used it. I know using, sorry, she said, is it Slack Connect? That's the name between Slack. I think trying to get off email helps.
Mm-hmm.
But I think ultimately, it just takes a lot of follow-up typically. So it's probably try to focus on, if I had one thing, I'd say most people, it's pretty rare to see someone who writes emails that are really tight. Just really put yourself in the space of, who am I writing to? Why would they care? Like copywriting, just practice that. Try to write better emails, shorter, easier to read, easier to act on. Or whatever the channel is, email, LinkedIn, whatever your channel is, like just try to write better.
Couldn't agree more. And I'll plus on the, I'm just going to show the schedule for a minute because we got some talks coming up with somebody who I think might have some pretty cool things to say about it. Scott Barker at 11:15 and Michael and Jim also at 11:15 in Zoom. So if you're hanging out in YouTube, you're going to follow me over to the roundtable with Scott. And if you are wanting to join that other one, check your email or check Slack for a link to join that other roundtable. But I will say text, hugely effective if you're in communication with the person already. Torlando, you've heard me say this already. Zeal, you've been here for a bit. Sending meeting calendar invites is super, super effective. If you've already got permission to sort of contact them and go back and forth. It is not very effective if you're sending it cold. Zeal had a question about data sources. How do you map the entire universe of people who can buy across your SDR team? We have access to all the data in Zoom, but sometimes we're unsure of testing new segments. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Actually, you might.
Yep.
I'm gonna mute. I got a cough coming.
So I'll start. I think, Zeal, it's a great approach is to start by thinking about, how do I map everything? We've got some, and I'll get Marisol or Julian in the chat to fire some links to Kenny's talks on the market fit side of things, because those are really great resources and sort of provides a bit of a methodology for how to do it. But I think thinking about it in the first place as mapping the market, and then coming up with all the potential permutations of that, and then deciding on these are the top ones, and then going and building that list. Because if you just said, okay, well, we've access to all of Zoom, but it's still going to cost you X per contact to pull that contact into your Salesforce, whether you're paying Zoom for it or just the cost of managing those contacts. So you want to make sure you figure out what is our total addressable market? How do we break that down into intelligent segments? And I would recommend checking out the market fit content we have there, and then picking those top ones and testing some hypotheses on, okay, well, here's our top segment. I think they're going to respond to this type of campaign. It's a very scientific way of thinking about it. But that's probably, that'd be my initial approach. And another reminder from Zeal as I scroll down chat here to hit that subscribe button. We've got some more great content coming out on these topics. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss anything, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification icon. We got a great question here from Torlando Raymond. Thank you for hitting the subscribe button. I appreciate that. Torlando, what should you do if your company resources necessitate the SDR to play both sides? Should they focus on one and accommodate the other? So basically, how do you balance if I'm a SDR and I've got to do inbound and outbound?
Well, yeah, inbound comes first if you're getting any good leads, right? Because that's just free money if you're getting good leads from inbound. So that comes first, and then after that, outbound. If it turns out, because it does happen sometimes, that all your inbound leads are just kind of not a fit, and it's really rare, you only get a handful, or most of them is just kind of once in a while you get a good one, then you make outbound your priority. So one is your priority, and the other is an afterthought. Having said that, if you don't get a lot of inbound leads, again, maybe that's something that a sales manager or someone can handle part-time, at least for routing. Try to anything that can kind of free up your outbound time. It takes just like blocks of dedicated time. One of the challenges is that outbound is a slow rhythm. There's a lot more research and thinking and kind of trying, while inbound is a very fast rhythm, right? You have to kind of be on it if something comes in.
Perfect. We get a question from John Simo. Aaron, do you have any principles or tips for running a killer discovery process? I mean, that was my slide, John, but we'll ask Aaron. I don't take any offense to it.
I think make sure, inbound versus outbound. And I would say the main one is that trying to take your salespeople and as part of their onboarding, introduce them to all parts of your company. Like the best way to onboard someone is to have them kind of shadow as many different types of calls as possible. Sales calls, marketing calls, customer support. Like, can they get on some customer support calls and listen to what the customers are saying? And that, as well as the more conversations they can have, the better. If you're onboarding a prospector, it's tough because just the nature of the job is it's very slow to have enough conversations. To have them call old inbound leads if you've got them, or friends or other people. So the more they can either listen to calls from across the company, not just sales, because if they understand, the more they understand about the product and who uses it and what works and listen to customers, it'll be easier for them to actually run a discovery because they know the fit versus they're trying to run a discovery by just reading, off of pre-done script or template.
Totally. So we got bunches of questions. If we didn't get to them, we got a couple minutes left until we got to run to the roundtable. But Dots was asking Aaron, any tips? So Dots is about to take on running an SDR team. Any tips for leading SDRs?
If you haven't done prospecting or whatever the SDRs are doing, do some yourself. I can't remember if it was Sarah or Danielle who said it earlier this morning, but the only way that you'll really be great at that team, or the main way, is if you have a hand in it, so you know what it's like to be in the trenches doing the job. And even if you've done it before, do it. If it's a new company, do it the new company. Okay, I believe any VP of sales that you hire should be willing to have some sales cycles with customers so they know what it's like to be hands-on, so they're better able to document, manage, coach, or train the people they've got. So get your hands dirty.
Beautiful. Everybody saying thanks for that. John was asking, how do you gauge the right timeline outside of asking directly? I would ask directly. I mean, through the conversation, and it's tough to give you specific advice without looking at, okay, well, where are we in the sales process? But asking about, when you're asking those questions that are going to elicit pain responses, right? You're going to be able to quantify that and understand, like, where is it in their list of priorities, right? If you think about, how they're organizing their life, if they're an executive, they might follow something like rocks, or they might be MBO, or they might be, have KPIs, or they might have priorities, or however it is. Like, you want to understand how they are managing their quarters, managing their plan for the year, and asking sort of, where does this fit on their list of priorities? I mean, that's probably one of my favorite questions. Usually you can kind of get a sense for it. You can hear how they're talking about things, whether, like, you can almost tell if they're leaning in a little bit or if they're sort of sitting back. If they're leaning in, they're probably a little bit more interested. And yeah, this is something that we're really doing. If they're leaning back, they're probably, there's all these little things to tell, especially if you're on a video chat. But I think just simply asking, where does this fit on your priorities list? Right? And if it's not right now, okay, well, what has to change between now and then for this to make it to the top of your list? And then make sure you are absolutely recording that, and not just recording what that next step is, but also recording when they're going to take that next step. And so that when you go to follow up, you've got this. And Sarah's jumping in to say hello and kick us out of here, because it is time for us to make our way.